Welcome, everyone. We're just going to take a moment for everybody to get settled and to get connected to their Zoom. I'll just fill the air and give you some important announcements. Like, of course, if you need an interpreter, we will have this entire conversation interpreted. Plus, there is a live transcript at the bottom of the screen. If you click on live transcript, you can access our live stenographer there. And a big thank you to all of our interpreters and accessibility folks that helped make this all possible. We'll just give it one more minute for people to get settled, and then I'll introduce our panel and tell you all what you're here for. I hope you all know what you're here for. I hope you've already seen CODA. There might be spoilers, so be aware of that. We'll get started in just 1 minute. I'm very excited about tonight's screening. And yeah, I think we are ready to go. So welcome, everyone. My name is Isaac Zablocki. I'm the director and co-founder of the ReelAbilities Film Festival here in New York. And we're really excited to host this conversation of the Sundance Award-winning film, CODA. It is going to be released this week by Apple. I believe I saw theatrical as well as on their player as well. So you could check it out both virtually and in person. I have to say, seeing this film both ways, in person is the way to go. Movies should be seen together. And we hope that that you will tell all your friends to check this amazing film out and to help spread the word about this movie. Coming up, just to let you know, next week we have our closing night film from ReelAbilities, Not Going Quietly, is going to be screening both. It's going to be screening on our rooftop. So please join us that Tuesday night for Not Going Quietly. It will also be shown with open captions, so and audio description. So it will be an accessible screening, like I hope this one was for you too. Again, for the latecomers, this entire conversation is interpreted, and there are captions. If you click on the bottom of your screen on the live transcript CC, that will give you captions as well. Yeah, I think I'm ready to introduce our amazing panel. I'll start off with a few questions, and then audience, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and we will call on you and either open your microphone or open your camera to let you ask those questions directly. So I'm very excited tonight. And again, a big thank you to Apple TV Plus as the platform. I'm very excited to introduce the director of CODA, Siân Heder. Siân, thank you so much for being here. And then two people who need no introduction and have been to ReelAbilities in the past. Troy has been with us at least twice. Marlee was honored at one of our opening nights. Marlee Matlin.
Hello.
And Troy Kotsur.
And then I'll jump on right now. It's funny, 5:08. Okay, well, I'm gonna put my headset back on and I'll start this next little bit. But anyway, it's been a pleasure so far. And
I think we need to mute Troy. That was Troy's background, and he did not know. Thank you so much. This film, first of all, I have to say that above all, this film telling a universal story. Most importantly, for right now, I laughed really hard, and I give credit to all of our guests here for, in these times, we need a good laugh. And I think if there's one thing I'm going to take out of this film in these days, is it's good to see a film that's going to make you. I'll admit that I might have cried a little bit too, but it's good to see a film that is really going to make us laugh and make us, just feel inside. So I want to start with you, Siân, and ask, why did you want to make this film? Why did you want to tell this story?
I was just very drawn to the CODA experience. I think it was just a very unique story to tell. The film is based on a French film called La Famille Bélier. And I had been at Sundance with my first film, Tallulah, and originally it was a studio movie, and Lionsgate was looking to do a remake of the French film. And at first, I sort of felt like, why do a remake of any film? Especially I think sometimes with foreign films, it's like, why? Because, it's already been done. Do you just want it, in English? What are you looking for? But then when I saw the original film, I think I was very moved by the idea at the heart of the story, but I felt like in a lot of ways, there were so many missed opportunities with the first film. I think in the representation of deaf culture, in the exploration of ASL and the, CODA experience. And also I saw an opportunity to set it in a very specific place in the fishing community in Gloucester, Massachusetts, which was a community that I really knew well and was struggling, and was a great place to put this family in the heart of this movie. So in a way, I think I just got inspired by this experience and the chance to kind of come in and tell this story in a way that was richer and deeper and more real, and cast the actors that I had in the film. So anyway, I think I embraced the story underneath the movie and then really made it personal and made it my own.
I'm going to ask kind of the same question to Marlee and Troy, how you came to this film and why you wanted to be a part of it. Marlee, we'll start with you.
Well, when I first read the script, I said to myself, I have to do it. I just have to do it. I can't let it out of my grips. And I said to my team, get on it. I have to do it, because I remember the last time I read a great script that was written this way, that really felt like a great representation of deaf culture and everything about it. And that was so authentic. I just never, I couldn't believe that I was reading something like this and that it could be happening. And it was real on so many levels. You're talking about deaf parents, a hearing daughter, a fishing community, a CODA, a music, trying to be a parent to a child who has their own hopes and dreams, and trying to deal with parents who aren't familiar with what those hopes and dreams are, trying to make a connection, coming of age, all of this. And everyone evolves in this film. It's just a story that was just too good to not do.
Troy.
Personally, I was so excited. When I read it over, I love being able to use dirty sign language. It's not often that gets depicted in movies. So that was a thrill. Secondly, having both the hearing and deaf worlds, the two cultures that are usually apart, this is a perfect story that navigates both worlds. And I was so thrilled to have this opportunity. And with authentic casting, it was such a blessing working with Marlee, especially.
So he mentions authentic casting, and Sean, how hard was it to cast this film authentically? And, I'd say let's applaud the fact that it's authentically casted, but I think truly that's the only way to go. Tell us about that process. Did you think otherwise for a moment?
No, I mean, I never did. It to me felt like the only way to go with the story, and was part of my interest in making the film. I mean, I was coming in as an outsider, and I'm a hearing person, and I'm always going to be coming from a hearing perspective. And so in order to tell this story, I knew that there was no way that I could tell this story. It wasn't my lived experience. And I had to have collaborators in front of the camera and behind the camera who had lived this experience and were a part of this community and could speak to deaf culture in a way that I couldn't. And not to mention, there was so much talent within the deaf community. I mean, I remember starting out and my casting director asking me, how many deaf actors are there out there that could play these roles? And the reality is, these actors in front of you won these roles because they were right for these characters, but there were so many choices for each of these characters because there are a lot of brilliant deaf actors out there. And so that was exciting to me in the audition process, that, I could talk about Troy versus someone else and, have those conversations and really choose Troy because to me, he felt like a Gloucester fisherman, and he felt like he had the right blend of incredible humor, cross the line humor, and, but also deep emotional depth and an ability to connect to all of kind of the deeper parts of this character. And Marlee as well, I wrote it with Marlee in mind, but I was coming into this with an open mind where I thought there are probably other people that could play this part. And when I met with Marlee, her passion for this character and understanding this script and this story, and Jackie's fears about her kids leaving home, and what that is as a mom to want to hang on to your child, and all of those deep conversations that I felt like Marlee got this character in a way that was so in her body, like she's so funny. And, I don't get to see you be funny enough, Marlee. I feel like oftentimes like, that ability to play with comedy and have those lived moments. And the same with Daniel. I mean, Daniel really understood Leo's angst and his frustration and his anger at his parents, who had created this kind of codependent relationship with Ruby. And he's sort of the voice of reason in the family who's like, Ruby, go, you guys figure it out, and can kind of see the situation for what it is. And Daniel just really understood that guy. And he was so, he also just, he's sexy, and he feels like that Gloucester guy who's going to be on Tinder all the time. And then Amelia was really the hardest part to find. I mean, that was a big, wide search where I saw, 100 girls for that part, and had to find someone who could sing beautifully and have this voice that was going to blow away the audience and act in every scene, who was actually 17, who was going to sign like a fluent signer. So that was the hardest part, honestly, to find. And I found Amelia right at the end of my casting process when I was sure I was going to have to compromise in one of those areas. And she was just so brilliant.
Amazing. I also have to highlight the music teacher.
Eugenio, yes. Incredible.
Yeah.
He always plays funny, and he also is a very deep actor. I think he was lovely in that part and really connected to the kind of guy who, the teachers we all know from our lives who believed in us and expected more from us than we even expect from ourselves.
And casting someone specifically with an accent who is an outsider allows that connection of people who are feeling that they are outsiders. I think really to create a deeper bond. Was that always the intention?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted someone who, there aren't a lot of Latinx people in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and so he's coming in and he's a teacher and he's outside of this community as well. And I also think there are a lot of parallels between the CODA experience and children of immigrants, who oftentimes have to interpret in situations. And so I think that involving the immigrant experience in the story was something that was interesting in the way that it sort of created those parallels.
Yeah, we've shown through ReelAbilities a few films that relate to the CODA experience, and it was amazing to see how different minority populations and immigrants have connected to that experience specifically.
I had a woman come up to me after a screening in Gloucester and basically in full tears and just said, I just saw my story. And I was like, are you a CODA? She was from Gloucester. I thought maybe she came from a fishing family. And she said, no, my parents didn't speak English and they felt isolated from the community. And I was often interpreting for them. And I felt, so much guilt about leaving home when I did. And they pushed me out of the nest and said, go, so I think she just felt like she could see a lot of her own life in that story.
Marlee and Troy, both of you are hardworking actors who have had an amazing career and have done so much and have so many accomplishments and awards. How was this experience different than other films that you were working on? As far as I feel that the accessibility and the attention to the authenticity was more important in this film. And I'd love to hear about your experience on the set that made it different. Troy, we'll start with you this time.
Well, in the past, I always felt more isolated because in every story, it was full of hearing people who use sign language, or we had interpreters there, and I was the only deaf person. But here in CODA, it was a different feeling. It felt like home. I could use my own language with everybody. We all had this great chemistry, and that made our work so much easier. We wanted to give people the opportunity to really dive into our culture. And it was very different from any projects that I've worked in the past, TV or film. This is an unforgettable experience. It's indelibly in my heart.
I can agree a second what Troy just said, in that I've been in the business for 35 years and I've seen so many sets. And yes, Troy is right when he pinpointed that it gets a bit lonely at times, where you might be taking a break for lunch and you're ending up eating with your interpreter. And it's not that the cast has excluded you, it's just not the same. There's a connection that's missing. Or maybe you're working together fine on the set, but then I always felt like an outsider on the set every time. Yet I knew that they respected me as an actor and I was doing my job just like everybody else. But at the same time, on a personal level, in terms of, chatting at length and feeling relaxed and not having to rely on the interpreter, was so completely different than we're on CODA. I was in my element. It was in my world. It was my life, my culture. It was so liberating for me as an actor. There was no barriers. None existed whatsoever. There was interpreters left and right. There was crew members who were learning sign language. Sean was learning sign language. I had an opportunity to talk with my co-stars in sign language. And it was I could just say it was 100% accessible, inclusive. And Sean, thanks to Sean, she made certain that we got the same level of treatment as the crew in terms of accessibility, in terms of communication. And yeah, the story itself, we got it because we have lived it as deaf people. But working on a set, it was gold.
I second that.
I want to jump into the movie itself for a moment, and really all three of you can answer these questions as far as really the story and the arc that we see in the film, and Amelia's story. She's someone who, would you say she is defined by her parents' disability, that she has, that is the characteristic that she's taken on? And is that something that she's looking to possibly break away from?
I wouldn't say it that way. I think there's something generationally that happens in fishing families that is just maybe even more pressurized than what was going on between, feeling responsibility with her, deaf parents. I think there's an expectation, and Troy's character, Frank, says it in the movie, my dad fished, his dad fished, that generations are going to keep doing this one thing, and they're going to keep going out to sea on the boat, and your family is everything, and you stick with your family and you make it work. And this is a livelihood that's dying and it's going away, and there's no way to make a living at it anymore. And so I think on one hand, a lot of the pressure is Ruby's trying to be a part of saving her family's way of life, which I think is the story for a lot of working class Americans who cannot make a living anymore. And so that's an intense pressure. And the poverty that the Rossies are living in as a result of losing their livelihood is adding a pressure to the situation that I think is intensifying whatever pressures are there as a CODA. I think the pressures as a CODA are something that Amelia and I talked a lot about. And, I talked to Marlee and Troy about, because they both have CODAs and every CODA has a different story. I think in this case, there's not accessibility in this town. It's a small town that doesn't have an interpreter at the health clinic and doesn't have an interpreter at these town hall meetings where they should, quite frankly. And so in a way, Ruby has had to step up and be that person for her family. And yes, simultaneously, it's a responsibility, and it's a big responsibility for a kid. And as Frank says in the movie, she never got to be a baby because she always had to kind of step into this role. At the same time, one of the things Amelia and I discussed with her character is there's a lot of self-confidence that comes with being that important in your family. And there's a lot of feelings of self-worth that you get when you have a role to play in your family and you're important and you feel like you're in control of a situation. And there's a lot of fear Ruby has about leaving that cocoon and going out in the world and not knowing how to navigate the hearing world when she's actually more comfortable in deaf culture. So I think a lot of it is about this girl feeling brave enough to step out on her own and find herself. And, there's a moment in the movie where her teacher calls her out on it. And he says, I'm not going to listen to this from someone who's too afraid to even try. And she says, I've never done anything without my family before. And, I think Ruby is holding herself back because Ruby feels safe with her family and safe at home and connected to her family. And I think she doesn't know what lies out there in the world for herself. And I felt that way, quite frankly, leaving my family. I came from a very tight-knit family. My parents are both immigrants. I felt like so much of who I was wrapped up in them and who they were. And it was very scary to kind of leave home and be like, oh, I have to figure out who I am without them, and what that identity is. So to me, it's about growing up and individuating yourself and finding out who you are outside of kind of the people that you love.
Marlee or Troy?
Well, Ruby has to grow up faster than most kids have to in their homes. She became an adult more quickly than most of her friends in order to facilitate communication between her parents. And she was born into it, and she discovered music at some point, and that music helped her create an identity. And then it was okay for her to grow up and pursue her passion, a passion that she didn't even know had within her. And it was music that helped create this identity, that helped create who Ruby was, to the point where she had to leave home and her parents didn't even know what to make of it. And so, as I said earlier, it was for an opportunity for her whole family to evolve on this learning curve.
Troy?
I agree with what Marlee has just said. In real life, I have a CODA daughter, and I understand what she had to go through. None of her friends really understood what it's like living with a deaf family, and I see her struggle. And now with CODA as a movie, I'm sure there are so many CODAs that resonate with this story, and they're like, yeah, CODAs rule.
One of many, many, many stories, CODA stories. This is just one of many, many CODA stories.
And what's
there
beautiful
are plenty to share.
Yeah. And what's beautiful, I think, is also that it's something that resonates to everyone's experience. I mean, beyond the outsider experience that we talked about a little bit before, it also just talks about, people finding their voice, people following their dreams, people going through teenage angst and dealing with parents that that are not always appropriate. So I think it makes the CODA experience very relatable.
And I think, like you said, I mean, so many of these things, you know, I grew up because my parents were not American and didn't come from this country. And I had things that I felt like were culturally different about my parents that you know, all you want to do when you're a teenager is fit in and be the same as everyone else. And like my dad, you know, wore a Speedo at the beach because he was from Hungary. And that was very European to like wear a tiny bathing suit at the beach. And I remember being like, oh my God, my dad, like, can you just put on normal shorts like every other American dad? So I think what Troy is talking about, I mean, Troy and Marlee both have teenagers, and teenagers are such a specific breed of person because you're at that very fragile place where you're trying to find yourself, and anything that's a difference or makes you feel like an outsider is incredibly sensitive. And at the same time, Ruby's proud of who she is, you know, and I think that's where she feels the most confident is when she's at home, and when she's at school, she's sort of living in all the insecurity of not really feeling comfortable actually in the hearing world. So I think hearing all these different experiences, even talking to Marlee about the differences in her 4 kids, you know, talking to Troy about his own daughter. We had many CODAs working on set who were all kind of sharing their own experiences. So I think just hearing the variety of stories and how everyone, you know, what are the commonalities in this experience? And then what are the things that are just vastly different? You know, there's CODAs that don't sign at all. There's CODAs that fully are, you know, embrace deaf culture and feel more comfortable in deaf culture than they do in the hearing world. So I think there's just the gamut of experiences. And like Marlee said, this is just one story.
I'm going to ask 2 more questions, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. So folks, if you have questions, put them in the chat. I know there's a lot of them there already, and we'll bring you online to ask those in a moment. My first question is going to be to Troy and Marlee. I feel that there's a revolution going on as far as disability representation in Hollywood things. I know it's been a very long road and a big process, but I feel like the needle is starting to move a little bit. Do you feel this is part of that? I'll of course, you know, note that in the last year we had Best Summer Ever and Crip Camp, and we're seeing it in Reelabilities every year. Just more and more mainstream films coming out that are relating, that are appropriately presenting disability. Do you find a revolution going on with disability representation in film right now? Is this just our perspective?
No, it's not just our perspective. I understand. I mean, Crip Camp, it couldn't have come at a more perfect time. Celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, as well as Crip Camp being a story, a true story. It was not something that was out of the mind of a writer or piece of fiction. It broke the mold, and I think a lot of people realized that the disabled community is a community that has gone through and suffered at the hands of barriers and discrimination and accessibility and the lack of rights. And so Crip Camp really, I mean, if it weren't for Crip Camp, I think that we probably would still have to be struggling for our rights in terms of the efforts that were told in this film. So having said that, I've seen a change, more or less. I'm not a complainer, but yet I can say that I can see things are changing for the better for us in a way where we don't have to keep repeating ourselves and explaining what we can do, what we need to do, what people need to do, and how we can fix things and how we can collaborate. Because you're seeing more of us, even in the film that was shown, Feeling Through. and that got nominated for an Oscar, and people recognize this film and that movie. And I mean, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, a lot that has been accomplished, a lot more to come. And as long as we all work together, then yeah, it can happen.
I completely agree with everything Marlee just said. It's instead of fear, let's just add in 4 more letters and make it fearless. Let's make that happen. I've seen a shift. And so far, especially with CODA and having open captioning, I mean, I have always waited at my house for the DVD so I can have the subtitles. These changes are happening now, and this benefits everyone. It's a huge step forward, and I want to thank Apple TV to really get this ball rolling here in Hollywood.
Absolutely. I would hope that other studios follow suit, and financiers and people who write and people who direct and producers will follow suit with what Apple has done, what CODA has done, and understand that this is something we can do. This is something we can do together with the community.
And this is my call to the audience to tell everybody you know to see this film. If more people see this film on Apple TV Plus or in the theaters, wherever they're going to see them, then more films like this will be brought to the public. It's a business. That's how that works. So please do share the word. I think there's a huge opportunity here. My last question, until we turn to the audience, for Sean, I also have to credit that this production not only was such an inclusive production, but you're also presenting the film in a very accessible way, and really pushing the envelope when it comes to accessibility in cinema. Can you share with the audience a little bit about kind of like how that can be done well?
You know, I think that there are a lot of arguments studios make about why things can happen, you know, business models. And I mean, from casting, you know, actors at the beginning where it's like, well, you need stars in the movie or you're not going to get your financing, and all of these arguments that are made all along the way. Most of the time, those arguments are actually, pardon me, but bullshit. I mean, the financing, they've never shown, you know, a tie between the success of the film and the names that are in the film. I mean, it just hasn't been done, but I think there are these models that have been in place for a really long time. And I think, you know, the pushback against open captions is like, well, that's going to be distracting for hearing people. And, you know, people aren't going to want to go to the theater because nobody wants captions, you know, on their screen, or filmmakers don't want, you know, they want the purity of their image that they've created. But I will say that I think most filmmakers don't work on their captions as though they are part of the movie. And one of the things that I made sure to do with CODA is work on the captions and make sure that the captions aren't spoiling the joke, you know, that the timing is right, so that, you know, when Troy farts in the movie, the fart caption comes up at the same time that the sound comes up. So you're not getting the caption ahead, or you're not staggering all of those moments. Very good fart, by the way, Troy. He didn't do it. I added it later.
Thanks for letting me know that.
But I do think that, you know, I was very lucky with Apple that there was no fight. You know, I said, I want to do open captions, and they were like, great, we'll do open captions. They saw it. They saw why it was important. They didn't fight it. You know, they have captioned all of their material. I said, I want the trailer captioned, any piece of social media that you put out. I don't care if it's like a 4-second little scene, like, I want captions on it. And they were like, great. And they did it. So these companies can do it, you know, and I agree. Like, please tell your friends to go see this movie, because I do think it is a business model. And the more you can point to it and go, look at that movie that was a huge success and did it, and then more movies will follow suit, because they see that it's not a deterrent, and all kinds of people benefit from captions. It's not just deaf audiences, you know, it's also, you know, my parents who are older, who have a hard time hearing the dialogue when, you know, mixed in with the thing. I think, you know, my daughter who's learning to read granted, she learned a lot of dirty words from reading the captions now, but like she is into it. So I think times are changing. People just, this needs to just become the norm, you know? And I think the more that it happens, the more it won't feel like it's getting in the way of anything. And I will say to filmmakers, you know, this is a part of your movie. And just like you go into the color correct and you futz over every little color decision, and you go into the sound design and you make sure that you hear the bird chirping at exactly the right time, like you can do the same thing with your captions so that they feel integrated into the movie. They feel like they're part of your story and what you want to give, you know, present to the world. And then, you know, also that your deaf audiences are not getting the shaft, like when they watch your movie with captions, you know, they're not getting some company, you know, that, I mean, I remember at Sundance watching sorry, Marlee, go, you can jump in.
No. Go ahead.
It's just one last thing, which is at Sundance, watching the live captioning come up over the award ceremony. And thank God they put an interpreter on screen, but the live captioning just kept saying dead family, like that this was a dead family and like Ruby and her dead family. And I was like, no, this is not a movie about dead people. So live captioning can go wrong in a million ways. And anyway, it's just like, it's important. We're moving it all forward. And Marlee, you can jump in.
No, you're right. Captioning, I mean, deaf people are so accustomed to watching captions that don't even have anything to do with us on screen, particularly when we're talking about live captioning. And I know that it still needs to be fixed, but I guess my next fight, and it shouldn't have to be a fight, but one of many issues, among many battles that I want to get to, which is to have captioning where you're watching, for example, a trailer on television when they're promoting a movie, and they don't caption those. They don't caption trailers. So how can you draw in a deaf audience to watch a movie, to watch your film or television show if your trailer or your preview doesn't have captions? If you want us to watch your film, if you want us to watch your new TV show, your episodic television show, caption it.
And I would say that for all the films we
and even lyrics too. Lyrics in movies aren't captioned as well.
So sometimes it's very important to do that, and we could talk about the music in this movie specifically. But I was going to say for ReelAbilities, you know, we're always receiving films that are meant for a disability audience and aren't, the materials aren't necessarily captioned, and sometimes even the screeners that we get to pick the films aren't captioned. Most of the time they're not captioned, and that means when I want to send a film about the deaf community to a deaf person, they can't necessarily see it till it's actually captioned.
You know, I've worked closely with the Motion Picture Academy to make sure that all screeners now are going to be captioned, and they are.
It's crucial. We're going to take a question from the audience. I want to get to let the audience be a part of this, because I really feel that this film is about community in many ways and how we connect to one another as a community. And it's great to have a community here with us live tonight. So our first question is going to come from Tal. Tal, you're on the line.
Hi, first of all, thank you for a great movie. I was curious about Amelia, how long it took her to learn ASL, and is she like truly fluent now?
No, she's not fluent now, I don't think, but she has continued to study, and so have I. I mean, I think once you start on that journey and get excited about the language, it's something that, you know, you keep incorporating in your life. Yeah, I mean, it was really, like I said, very tough to find that role. And there were so many things I was looking for. And I looked for a real CODA. You know, I was going out and I was trying to find somebody maybe who already had that background, who would be fluent in sign language. But then I also had to find the singing voice in that person that was going to blow everybody away. And she had to be 17 years old. And so it was, you know, a big search to really find, you know, how I could discover that person. And when I auditioned her, it was like a many part audition, and she had to, you know, initially started off and I saw her acting. She had to sing for me many times. And then she had to go off and learn a signed scene. And I showed that signed scene to two deaf friends at the time and just said, can you talk to me about her sign language and how, and I had a couple actresses I was considering at the end, and they all had to sign. And a big part of why I chose Amelia was not just her singing voice, which was unbelievable, and her acting, but her facility with sign language. Because I think for some people, it's not a natural, they're not expressive enough to use their face, or there's a disconnect kind of where they're signing from here down, but they're not engaged and connected to what they're saying. And Amelia was so inhabited the sign language, and really I could see that it was going to be something that she would take to, and so could the people that I showed it to. So we set her up with a deaf coach, Anselmo D'Souza, she was in Toronto at the time. And she worked for about 9 months with Anselmo, and he wouldn't let, she had to sign from the beginning with him. So there was no cheating or talking to your instructor using your voice. And I think she really dove in a way and was incredibly hardworking about, trying to get up to speed, and then having Anne and Alexandria, who were my ASL masters, who were key to this project, who were taskmasters with her, and she wanted to work like that. And Marlee was a taskmaster with her, who would, make her play celebrity in the van on the way to set so that she could get up to speed. And she was, hanging out with the deaf cast members and not using an interpreter, and really, really wanted to learn. So I think it takes a long time to become truly fluent. And, but she definitely, I think by the end of the shoot, felt like that's how we were communicating on set. I mean, my own signing and the process of shooting went like so far, just because I was so hungry to communicate my ideas and, desperate, honestly, to deepen the friendships that we were forming. And there's nothing like loving people and wanting to communicate with them that makes you want to learn a language faster.
We have a question from Jay-Z in the audience, and Jay-Z asked that I ask it for them. How did you balance the need of deaf/hard of hearing audience and the need of hearing audiences, and choose what to caption, such as the herpes or smoking hot moment in which the signs were not captioned?
Sometimes it was about the joke. So sometimes it was about, a joke landing. For instance, I mean, Troy is such an amazing improviser. And a lot of times what was written in the English line, there was a line that was, I'd give my left nut to tell them to go screw themselves. And what Troy did in that moment was, this whole thing where he had, sorry, I'm going to get dirty. I hope everybody's okay with that. You've all seen the movie, but he had his nuts, then he bit off.
I'm a bad influence.
He made it a grenade. He bit off the pin of the grenade. He threw it behind him. The grenade went off and was a big explosion. And the whole thing was so much fun. And to be honest, I wanted, there was no way to caption that for a hearing audience, because that is humor that comes out of ASL that Troy is so brilliant at. And I actually felt like there were a lot of moments where I chose to let the deaf audience experience something that the hearing audience didn't. And the hearing audience needed to, watch the story and be a part of that humor without necessarily knowing word for word, but you can tell what's happening. And so the moments that I actually chose not to caption was in a way honoring the ASL and choosing it over the English. The other moment is the moment where Ruby, signs how she feels when she sings. And I felt like, to me, ASL is more emotional and more like music than English and spoken English. And so in that moment where she's trying to explain music and how she feels about it, it's a natural expression to use the language she's more comfortable in. And quite frankly, sign something that you can understand whether you sign or not. You sort of get what she's feeling in that moment. So those were the moments that, I think there were times where I played with what to caption or not. And mostly sometimes it was about just letting the ASL live as ASL without having to translate into English, which to me sometimes is a little more limiting in terms of the narrative possibilities of what you can express within ASL.
I mean, I think it's very true in the movie. I think also I see so many movies that will sometimes take shortcuts, and while the conversation is in ASL, they'll shoot it from above the shoulders, and and find the way for the audience to easily access. And in this one, I mean, there are scenes where the audience members basically put in the position where they need to follow the ASL conversation. They need to sit there and actually pay more attention. And then there's, of course, that brilliant, beautiful moment of the whole scene going silent, just as this grand moment of singing, where the audience and suddenly you're. Sorry, motorcycles outside. You see, and the audience wants to actually, the audience is put in the position of the deaf community, and I think bringing those to life is part of kind of the responsible way this movie was made.
Well, movies are the best tool that we have for creating empathy. There's nothing like watching a movie and relating to the character and laughing with them and crying with them and feeling their journey that puts you in somebody else's shoes. And like with that tool at our disposal, I mean, that's why storytelling and representation are so important, because these are the tools that we have as human beings to experience what it is like to be someone else. And so those were the moments, and I've always felt committed to that in my work. I mean, I wrote on Orange is the New Black for 3 seasons. And guess what? After that show came out, people cared about prisoners, because you watch this show and it was a population you were willing to write off who felt like outsiders that you could kind of lock away and not think about. But that show and what Genji did with that show, the creator, is really these specific women and these specific stories and these lives that you cared about. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I guess I should care about what's going on with prisoners. And I work on Little America, and those are immigrant stories, and it's, humanizing the immigrant experience. So I think in a lot of my work, I feel like I would like to use my tools that I have as a storyteller to start taking people who are normally on the outside and putting them in the center, and letting us as an audience connect to that person and really understand that lived experience.
We're going to take another last comment from the audience. Arlene, you are on the line.
Hi, yeah, are you calling me? Okay. Whenever somebody calls me Arlene, I don't always get it because Arlene Romoff I am deaf, but I have cochlear implants. And I've had my implants for over 20 years. I think I've been in some places where Marlee's been, and our paths have crossed. I'm an author of 2 books on my cochlear implant experience. And we've come a long way since the 1990s. And just, of course, I was very interested in watching this film, and I loved it. I mean, I actually loved it. There are a lot of things that come up because obviously I did not choose deaf culture, and there are many, many reasons for that. And I was so happy not to get embroiled in any of the controversy, because we've had our fill of all that as far as opting for cochlear implants. And the film had nothing to do with that, had only to do with people and their lives. And in this particular instance, cochlear implants were never going to be an option. It just was not on that. It was never a choice. It just, that was a family then. This is the way it was going to be. And I understood that. And yeah, it was really good. And I'll tell you, you know, I mean, I lost my hearing. I know very well what it's like to be deaf. I don't sign because my whole world doesn't sign. I am involved with a lot of committees where there are people who do sign. So I know plenty and we mingle and everything. And I will tell you the relationship and the cohesiveness now between deaf culture and cochlear implant, we love each other. We just respect each other. And I think this is a really good time to have this movie for me to go tell everybody. They know my history, they know my background, and they know we've had issues before. This film has no issues, and I'm telling you that with somebody who has walked the walk. Totally.
Thank you, Arlene. Thank you so much.
And that's my feedback. If you want to give me any questions, I'd be happy to for now or for later. But yeah, thank you for letting me express this. And yeah, congratulations to you all. I really appreciate this film. It really has. That's why I'm here. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The question is, where can people see the film? And the answer is Apple TV Plus. I believe this weekend it's coming out there and in some local theaters, if you could catch it there too. So please do tell your friends, go see it again. It's better the second time, actually.
I will jump in to say, because I know people pay for a lot of streamers. I really do know that feeling. I pay for Netflix and Hulu and Amazon, and you're like, why do it? Apple's only $4.99. So get it to watch the movie. I'm like, I keep telling Apple, I'm like, tell people it's like the price of a cup of coffee, but really it is. And I feel like they have so much good content. And if you can't make it to the theater, like it's worth getting. And they have been huge allies, you know, for us. And so supporting them in exchange, I would say, go and do it. Not that Apple's like this little struggling company, but you guys get it.
I was going to say, you could also buy an Apple computer and they'll give you a free year of Apple TV Plus, right? Yes. Which is another way to doing it. I want to give a huge thank you and a huge congratulations. Marlee Matlin, Troy Kotsur, thank you so much for being here. Siân Heder, thank you for this beautiful film. Thank you all. I want to thank our interpreters, of course, and of course, our live stenographer. Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you at other events. Spread the word. Have a good night.
We love you.
Thank you. Thank you. Love you. Love you.